actually a brand is creating an energy circuit, and that energy comes from that emotional honesty. It's the Seinfeld, it's Larry David, that was based, they wrote based on experiences because it was emotionally honest.
Welcome to That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights of the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. If you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing and can do a small favor, rate or review the episode wherever you are listening or watching, subscribe or share with one other person who you think might enjoy today's episode. We'd really, really appreciate that. And of course, I do hope you are enjoying episodes of That's What I Call Marketing, and today we are here to entertain you. Yes, Robbie Williams style, without the singing. This is an episode all about entertainment and a bold declaration that as a brand you must entertain or die. To find out what all this is about, I am joined by Leanne Tomasevic, who is UK and US Head of Insights at Tracksuit, and Dan Salkey, who is from Small World, an agency that works with brands on an entertainment-first strategy using industry-unstandard talents. We'll find out what all that is about. And Small World and Tracksuit have come together to write Entertain or Die, and is based off the Entertainment Index, a data-driven scoring system using Tracksuit data that measures how effectively brands create and sustain entertainment value. Now, of course, if you have not heard of Tracksuit yet, well, where have you been? They are, of course, the company that are changing brand tracking. Because what was out of reach for so many consumer brands before, because it was costing too much, or maybe there was a budget there to do once a year dip, well, that has now changed radically, because with Tracksuit, you can have always on data at your fingertips that helps you have better conversations with those tricky C-suites. You know, the ones that love the data, how dare they? Well, they are going to love Tracksuit because it is the always on, affordable, beautiful brand tracking dashboard. And Tracksuit isn't just for brands, it is for agencies as well. And Tracksuit finding more and more agencies are looking to use and leverage their data. The team at Tracksuit are standing by at gotracksuit.com right now to show you how the dashboard works. And I would like to thank Tracksuit for their sponsorship of this episode. So check them out at gotracksuit.com. Okay, let's get on and find out all about Entertain or Die. Leanne, Dan, lovely to see you. Thanks a million for joining me. Really, really looking forward to entertaining the socks off everybody.
Thank you for having us, Connor. Really excited to be here.
Great stuff. Listen, we might just start really quick introductions. Leanne, start with you.
Yes, hi. So I'm Leanne Tomasevic, Head of Insight at Tracksuit. So we're a brand measurement platform.
And I'm Dan Salkey. I'm the co-founder and strategy partner at Small World.
Listen, we start how did the report, Entertain or Die, an amazing report and read. If people haven't read it, I've given them the places to go to. But how did this come about?
Yeah, I mean, it really came from wanting to understand the answer to 3 questions. Separately, Tracksuit and Small World are sort of thinking of these 3 questions. You know, who are the most entertaining brands in the world? What makes them entertaining? And does that entertainment value actually drive business results? Yeah. And luckily, you know, we were twin flames that met each other and sort of had that discussion and said, well, why don't we put some research together that actually proves all of those questions out. And that's effectively what Entertain or Die has become. There was a first edition of the report, which admittedly was just my own musings shouting into the wind almost. And this year, thanks to Tracksuit coming on board, I think we've really brought the research on, and in particular managed to prove that, yes, entertainment brands aren't just entertaining for the sake of being entertaining. They genuinely do drive business results. I'll probably let Leanne touch maybe on a little bit of the data behind what we found specifically there.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, there's so much to cover there. I wanted to get to business outcomes, but maybe we will come on to that. You know, I mean, entertaining is so helpful for brands of all sizes. And you know, and I think and at Tracksuit, we're an enterprise level brand management solution because we want to be affordable for lots of different brands at lots of different price points. And I think this is where entertainment comes into play. It's something that everybody can do, no matter what category you're in. So knowing that there wasn't much research, we wanted to understand and look at those entertaining brands and then look at, well, what is driving entertainment? What are the core metrics? And then actually, how can we measure those? And I guess that's something we'll probably touch on a bit later.
Yeah, but the bottom line of it is that, yes, entertainment brands do drive revenue growth and share price increase. Of the top 30 brands that we had in the index, who we deem to be the most entertaining brands in the world, 29 out of the 30 had a revenue growth in the last year, and 2/3 of those brands had double-digit revenue growth, which is really impressive, particularly in the challenging market that we're in today.
Yeah, 100%. There's so much we want to get into, but one of the things we've kind of we're touching on it here, but I'd love to kind of dig in deep is why being entertaining kind of isn't optional anymore, or isn't something that should only belong to that brand over there. Like, in social space for a long time, everyone's like,
Yeah.
oh, Ryanair do an amazing job. They're so entertaining, right? And then everyone tried to be Ryanair, but we'll get onto that later on. But like, some people felt they didn't have that permission, or it wasn't their space. But you're right, we're in a more competitive world. The world of search is upending, like everything. So why is it not optional anymore for brands to really be thinking about it being entertaining?
Ultimately, I feel like people today, and this is a brilliant thing, but people today have never had more power to decide what is relevant or irrelevant for them to see,
Yeah.
right? Their attention, they've never been in more control over their attention than this moment today. They have more power to block adverts, to pay for subscriptions that allow them to only see the things that they want to see, to engage with only what they want to engage in. So that's kind of the bottom line of it. But I think if we look at, why this is happening, one, media fragmentation. It used to be that you could really buy reach, right? You could have these broad reach fame moments. Now, today, the water cooler moment is dead. You don't really have those opportunities to get by effectively the collective minds and attention of people out there today. And that media fragmentation equally has meant that you're no longer competing with the likes of Mars and Mondelez and other CPG and FMCG brands. If you're in that category, you're actually in a scroll, this sort of internet Royal Rumble against media titans like Netflix, Mr. Beast, Fortnite. So that's what your competition is. And if that's your competition, the bar is just so much higher for what you need to do to get somebody's attention. And even if you can buy someone's attention, even if you are one of those brands that has a bottomless pit of paid media money, which are few and far between today, the price to win in that attention economy through paid social is going up exponentially. On platforms like Meta, cost per acquisition and cost per metric is going up, I think, 14% year on year, every single year. That's why we really believe entertainment is no longer optional. And it's also not the most costly strategy to follow, and the most scary strategy to follow is arguably more risky to just put your money into this sort of black box where Zuckerberg is laughing at you and collecting your dollars day by day.
Yeah, I mean, the attention economy, it operates in real time. 95% of what we watch on YouTube is based on algorithms. Like, there's not meaningful intent. I think we also used to talk about the 30-second elevator pitch, but who has 30 seconds? It's I think, isn't it on a phone, it's 1.7 seconds, I think it is, in terms of attention. So it's a 1-second glance. How do you get someone's attention?
Like totally. That's scary for brands, and like, again, because it's the scroll mentality. And even if you're watching, something on what is a TV device, like connected TV, particularly the younger generations, I sound so old. Younger generations are, well, sorry, I did have Dan Fleming say that over 35 was old the other day, and I couldn't. He's Dan. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But like that scrolling mentality is there on YouTube, on every, like, kids just like next, like entertain me, like, it's amazing. That need for entertainment is there. The shortness of that attention span is there. I guess how, like, maybe we get into it, but like, are there things that brands need to think about when thinking about understanding entertainment correctly? Like, what do we mean when we say entertainment? Like, this isn't necessarily about tickling the funny bone every single time, right?
Yeah. And to be honest, I think that's one of the main things that we've recognized from doing this piece of research and brought it to businesses and brands far and wide. They have said, "Oh, well, I'm not a funny brand. I can't be entertaining," and we've been very quick to say, no, there are plenty of entertaining entities and content out there that aren't funny at all. I mean, people love horror films. It's one of the fastest growing categories of entertainment films, and one of the most successful returns on investment that the movie studios are seeing today. Not funny at all. Equally, documentary content in the same way. We're captivated by dramas. There are tons of things that are entertaining, not because they are funny, but because they capture our attention basically, and they stop us and engage us and create an resonant emotional connection. And that's sort of what we tracked, across we tracked 7 attributes. Yes, one of those was humor, but we tracked a bunch of other attributes as well. It's one of the things that we want to really hammer home for the next piece of research, is like, this isn't just about being a funny brand. This entertainment as a factor is more about making you a brand that people want to seek out, rather than a brand that needs to interrupt someone's day.
I mean, one of those 4 metrics as well that were really powerful, in addition to humor, was character, actually being kind of relevant or relatable like a character from a TV show. And I think that is really about the story arc that Dan was talking about. It's this world that you build, and that people can become part of that world. And they themselves can act and build out that word for you. In some ways, your fans are sort of like your brand lore architects. They're kind of helping create that. So definitely it's much more than humor. And I think really humor is such a human, empathetic quality. It is about connecting with other people and having that deep connection. And I think that's, and actually humor is actually just really good at that. It's a way of building bonds. Yeah.
That distinction, totally. I think, between the brand lore and the maybe momentary attention that you grab from a viral moment, right? That you might hit on with a bit of luck or chance, and then there's the ones where just like, where did that come from? Nobody saw Demure going like that was going to be a thing, right? So you can't maybe account for that, but with maybe the sustained story arc, that's the place where you can then have a longer view on the role of your brand in this role of entertainment, right?
Yeah, 100%. Those trending moments, are always going to be important in the day-to-day role of a social media manager or a social lead. But as you said, you're actually adding to the attention that somebody else is getting by participating in that trend. The story of, can 100 men beat one gorilla? It's the story of the 100 men, the gorilla, that are getting all that attention, getting the share, getting the engagement, not the brand who participated in that conversation. As opposed to when you look at a brand, for instance, like Vacation Inc., who Shannon Comstock, who's the VP of marketing there, has talked about this. They actively eschew trends and don't seek to go into trends. In fact, their brand is all about helping people escape to a vacation state of mind, and it's actually a far more kind of absurdist, surrealist take, which feels like something that isn't engaging with the real world whatsoever throughout all of the touch points in the brand. For those who don't know, Vacation Inc. is a sunscreen brand that has taken the world of the 80s, when sunscreen used to be fun before people learn about skin cancer, and applied sort of this fun Miami Vice style world to sunscreen. And they have products like whipped cream sunscreen, for instance. But they do the opposite of trend jacking. They themselves, as the brand, are almost the trend. It's important for these brands who are entertainers to build their own brand lore. I think the best way of thinking about it like that is, imagine your brand as if it is a character in a TV show, as if it is the TV show itself that you're pitching to a new network. What would that one-page pitch for that character or for that TV show be? That's your brand lore. That's where you start,
Yeah, completely agree. And I think there's that. It's a way maybe then of thinking about it for brands. And this is one of the questions I have when I was reading through the report. I thought about the same thing. And I think it was in Seinfeld writer's room, Larry David was like, we only want you to write about experiences that you've really had, right? And then that brought through some, like, the amazing work Seinfeld, which if you watch today, bar like, the fact, they're making phone calls on the phone, not a mobile. Like it stands up, like, like you it really does. And so that's kind of when you have that, connection to, is like the brand lore is a lovely way of putting it. But maybe for a brand listening to this going, again, we've talked about this for size of brand, right? That this should be accessible for all brands. And you're like, I don't have a writer's room. Like I'm not Larry David. How can you think about that structure and setup of, and it's not that. So where maybe starting points for brands thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's lots of Larry Davids out there, and the writer's room approach is spot on. That is actually the approach that we take for a lot of the brands that we work with. So a really good example is Rescue Remedy, a legacy brand here in the UK and also in the US. It's just kind of stress and anxiety, remedy, basically. Herbal remedy, And they had realized that they were basically losing touch with a younger audience, Gen Z. Lots of girls were actually talking about them in this very unhinged way across TikTok, so real lived experiences, but not talking about them in the way like, oh, I use this product before I'm stressed for an exam or before a driving test. It was like, I'm taking a whole bottle of this before my Uncle Pete comes round because I'm the only one in the family who knows he's having an affair with my Auntie Helen. And it's like very unhinged scenarios and settings. Or, you know, I down a bottle of this before I have to talk to my boss because I said something heinous to him last night at the Christmas party. So we recognized that and we said, okay, well, let's assemble a writer's room of up and coming Gen Z female comedians across the UK who will genuinely have some of these experiences and take the experiences of girls who are already talking about this, but also their own lived experience. And just like Larry David said there, create a writer's room to talk about these things, to create a TikTok first TV show, basically, which is still kind of running to this day. So it shows you, you know, you don't need to be a massive brand to run a writer's room style approach. There are plenty of amazing, funny, witty, intelligent people who are creating fantastic content out there that, you know, is basically their pitch book to you. You just need to do a bit of scrolling across TikTok and across Instagram, and you can find them. They're the ones who have these lived experiences and also know how to create content that entertains people rather than advertises to people.
It's a kind of a great warning, I think, for maybe senior marketers, you know, who are like, well, you know, have they done this? Have they done that? Like, actually, some of the richness comes from, you know, from people who haven't done the things that got us to where we are now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It really just depends what you're asking people to do, right? So I think it's just a reassessment of the skills necessary for the different jobs that exist within your team.
Yeah, actually, just let other people in the community get involved and leverage that. And obviously, not everybody has a huge community that they can leverage, but there's ways of just looking and understanding the community and responding to it, you know, and you can do that in very small ways, just like Duolingo has.
And to your point about scaling entertainment there, then kind of like that is the only way that you're going to be able to scale entertainment. If it's constantly a conversation that's coming from the brand and you having to lead that conversation, you only have a certain amount of resource within your brand. You need to empower other people and you need to incentivize other people in your community, in your network, who are, you know, evangelists for the brand, to go and spread that message, to carry the conversation for the brand. That's the only way to scale it, and that's what a lot of these brands recognize really well. Like, it's additive, and the audience almost feels like the brand is their Play-Doh, basically, that they have a greater chance of being heard and participating in the brand than they do of others.
No, and I have loads of great examples are popping into my head of brands that do this. I think in beauty, like I think Elf Cosmetics do it wonderfully. I think the Irish brand Sculpted by Amy does it differently to Elf, but brilliantly as well, by tapping into the community, just understanding what they're thinking about. And so I think then that gets us into thinking about, you know, I guess the genre of entertainment. Maybe, Leanne, are there different types of genres that you kind of came across, and how does a brand start to think about, well, where do we fit? You know,
I mean, genre, I think, comes back to the where we started the conversation. It's because of the proliferation of media. So if you're showing up in lots of different places, actually, genre is the thing that allows you to have that consistency. You know, I've sort of like read about, is genre the new brand positioning? I mean, I think so, yeah. And it's also getting really specific. You know, it's not just about, oh, well, our genre is being authentic, but it's about, is this documentary style? Is this kind of real slice of life realism? And part of that is creating that level of distinction. So it's such a super exciting time to be in. I think, returning to Duolingo, what was really interesting in a recent conversation with them, I assume they don't mind me saying, is that what was interesting is that they've got 6 mobile phones in their office, and each phone represents a interest group, and they recruit for these interest groups. And it's interesting how the genre, by understanding these different interest groups, they can think about how does their genre play out in those different places, and that they can be playful with it. I think it returns to Dan's point about the Play-Doh comment. So I think it's an exciting time to be a marketer.
Changes the brand rules, I think, a bit. Like the traditional brand, you know, the Onion, you know, I talked to some amazing people in Diageo, and I know like things like the Dweeb work amazingly. And I think having principles of how you build a brand, but necessarily kind of saying, this is our onion and are really strict guardrails about brand, like they have to be loosened,
Really?
and that's can be. I think that's terrifying for people.
Yeah, totally. But I don't think this is the other thing that we try to talk about. This none of this is in. None of this is to replace the fundamentals of building a brand and the fundamentals of marketing, right? Diagnosis, for instance, Mark Ritz will always talk about diagnosis, strategy, tactics. In this case, diagnosis is listening to your fans and understanding the fandoms that they're interested in. Still exactly the same. You're just talking about fans instead of customers. Strategy, positioning, in this case, as Leanne said, is a new way of thinking about that as like brand law, genre. And when it comes to tactics, tactics is obviously last, and that is the fun stuff. But these brands, approach tactics in a very social first, internet first way. It's always about tactically trying to steal people's attention or earn people's attention rather than pay for people's attention. So yeah, none of this is flying in the face of traditional sort of marketing and brand building science. I think it's just an updated version of this playbook. And I actually think the opposite of, what people talk about, which is we want it to feel really authentic. I think authenticity has kind of been a proxy for reality. And I think today lots of customers want things that aren't really authentic. They understand they're not being lied to. Like Liquid Death is a brand, for instance, right?
If you want to find out more about Tracksuit, go to gotracksuit.com and find out how they can be your affordable, always on brand tracking dashboard.
To me, the authenticity point is really about emotional truth or emotional honesty. So even if you take the Liquid Death example, let's take their Depend Diapers campaign, which I'm sure everybody has seen. And the idea behind that was, you're in the mosh pit. The last thing you want to do is have to take time out and go to use the toilet. So, okay, in some ways, it's a very ridiculous scenario that you would wear Depend. You'd be kind of like wearing diapers or incontinence pads or whatever it is. But actually, who can't relate to the fact that I don't want to interrupt a moment when I'm having fun to go to the toilet? Actually, that's total emotional honesty. And now people are so savvy, they won't accept anything less. So actually this authenticity, I think, is just that you can't do fake, you can't do forced. Brands have to talk to a human truth, because otherwise nobody's going to spend the time. I think to Dan's point before, you could just spend huge amounts of money, you'd get the attention of whatever you did, but it's not enough. I think this is part about being part of the fabric of culture. And then the authenticity is about having emotional truth in that culture. Actually, we were just talking to someone else recently. He was talking about creating an energy circuit. Actually, a brand is creating an energy circuit, and that energy comes from that emotional honesty. It's the Seinfeld, it's Larry David. That was based, they wrote based on experiences because it was emotionally honest.
Yeah, and then take that kernel of emotional honesty, which is probably not that entertaining, and make it 10 times more absurd, right?
Yeah.
The spicy present is another thing that the co-founders of Mischief say. They're like, we never create anything new or futuristic. We take something that people already think today, and then we add a bit of spice to it. We make it 10 times more absurd. We make it 10 times more unbelievable. And that is the right approach to take when you're doing entertainment first marketing.
I love that. I love the energy circuit idea. Isn't that a wonderful way for, again, all this kind of just reframing thoughts, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's the importance of language, actually. But yeah, and I think like directly in your wheelhouse is the importance of insight in all of this. Getting kind of proper human insights that, are going to actually unlock something.
Absolutely. And it sort of seems like a banal thing, but no, there is no replacing that. It is about absolutely understanding how we think. It's the theory of mind. It's what we believe in, what's important. I mean, and again, I think this is why humor plays a role, but humor, again, is really just about that observation of human behavior. So yeah, it's absolutely essential. And actually, I think the top entertainment, I mean, Dan will talk about this. He does so much research, so much insight work, because actually that is what sparks these wonderful entertainment ideas. Even the Liquid Death example, that came from a human insight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think today we again, everything is a new spin on it, as you said, Connor. But it is more about fandom mapping than it is doing traditional qual. I think a brilliant case study on that, and it's not one of mine, unfortunately, but is McDonald's and the work they've done with Wyden and Kennedy's over the last 5 or so years around fan truths. That's exactly what we're talking about here. But not just they looked inward at the brand, where they did research, going to McDonald's stores and talking to people about the nuances of how they experience McDonald's. Do you leave the pickles out, or do you dip your chips in the milkshake? I also eat them. I take my girlfriends and double up. But all of those types of things that they've built brilliant marketing around. But then equally, they went outside of the brand and they said, okay, cool, you're eating McDonald's, you're a fan of McDonald's, but what else are you a fan of? What else are you interested in? And that led them to doing collaborations in the world of anime, for instance, recently. It's led them to lots of like streetwear and fashion collaborations with people like Kerwin Frost in New York. And it's something similar that we do with a lot of brands that we work with. We'll do fandom mapping. So we'll go out and understand, okay, you're a fan of this particular brand, but that's only going to get us so far, because really how much are people fans of brands, right? They're fans of things in entertainment, but what are the other things that you are interested in, genuinely interested in, that we can be a part of and give back to, not come in and interrupt that conversation, interrupt that experience, but actually give a value add to. Fandom mapping is essential for any brand that wants to be entertaining, because that's where you find those home truths, either about your brand or outside of your brand, to then build creative ideas off the back of.
Yeah, and it's a great way, again, you're 100% right that people just don't think about our brands at all, right? So they think about their world, and even I spoke to Marcus Collins, about this, and he was talking about personas, and he was like personas don't exist. He goes, I'm Marcus Collins, I'm part of the Collins tribe. I went to this university and I followed this team, this sports team, and he goes, that's my world, right? And so how do you find ways of engaging me in those ways and entertain me? And so I love thinking about it that way, because I think personas are quite limiting. It's not saying they don't have a use, but they are quite limiting, because it's not how we engage with the world. And I work in a category that nobody loves. I work in insurance. Nobody wants to have to renew their car insurance. Do you know what I mean? Nobody does. So how do we think about entertaining? It's a real challenge, right? And something we're trying to figure out.
Absolutely.
As
well. I mean, if you take, we sort of talking about this about toilet paper. Who gives a crap?
Yeah.
I mean, how does toilet paper be entertaining? I mean, in some ways you think, why did nobody do this sooner? Toilet paper is absolutely entertaining, and it's even entertaining in the name. Packaging with "have a great wipe" and things like that, and lots of funny copy lines. So absolutely, Connor, you can absolutely do that in insurance, and you can.
I think it's all relative as well, right? There are pure play entertainment brands who are in the world of gaming, who are in the world of TV, film, etc., sports, and then there are entertaining brands. And what we're trying to do is inspire brands to just be a bit more entertaining. And the types of brands that I really love working on, I'm working on a B2B brief at the moment. It's a joy to kind of work on, because the brief is effectively, how do we hijack a channel like LinkedIn, which is very self-serious, very worthy, very B2B foundery, and how do we inject entertainment value into that channel and tell a brand lore story on that platform? Immediately I know that we can have massive success, because there just aren't those stories on the platform. And I think that's why you see on those types of platforms, when people do inject a bit of entertainment value into the content they put out there, it really does fly. Everyday people trying to be entertained regardless of the platform that we're on. So we're starting to see that boring brands in boring categories have a massive upside to following an entertainment first approach.
The bar is low.
Yeah, exactly. And this just comes back to breaking the cultural or the category orthodoxy, which is like Douglas Holt writes about in terms of cultural strategy. And it's not, I think sometimes it's hijacked as, let's think about the trends, but it's not. It's just going against the grain, but also doing it in a way that is acceptable. I really love the Mayer principle, which is most advanced yet acceptable. And actually, and even if you return to the liquid death idea, it's a really super advanced idea in that you're wearing Depend diapers in a mosh pit, but yet it's acceptable because the insight is true. And I think it's just understanding things like that. It's the same with Who Gives a Crap. Who Gives a Crap, it's an insight. Nobody really gives a crap about their toilet paper, So again, they've brought humor to that. So I think there's there's lots of opportunity in boring spaces.
The most advanced yet accessible is a really good principle to actually
Yeah.
apply to some of the most entertaining things in the world. Like, look at a show like Severance, for instance. It has, the reason it captivated people, I believe at least, is because it has this kind of like eerie timelessness to it, where it's set in an office and you can imagine it's sort of, you know, you could be in that world, but then equally it's a bit sci-fi, so it feels like it's you're just constantly trying to figure it out in your head. And lots of the things that are the most entertaining to us out in the world are those things that feel partly familiar but we're still trying to figure out in our head.
Yeah, and sorry, Cultural Strategy is a wonderful book actually, and I'd highly recommend people get a hold of it and read it. It's fascinating, and I've interviewed Doug Cameron, who was co-author on the podcast. So find that episode, and it's wonderful. I was really lucky I got to do some work with him before, and but seeing that, how you kind of look to break orthodoxies, and like it's a wonderful way to think about it. So yeah, sorry, just wanted to say that is just one of my favorite. I'll call it a marketing book, but I'm not sure Doug Holt would, but it's an academic book as well, isn't it? Like, it's a hard read,
And it's been around a long time. You know, it's not newish, but yeah.
Creativity Inc. is another one that I think is good for this way of thinking as well. I think so. Anyway, we've touched on, you know, you've mentioned B2B there, and you know, there are possibly people listening go, but my brand can't. Are there brands that should not be in the entertainment space?
I'll sort of hang my hat on this, and I'm always up for the challenge. I personally don't think there are any brands that can suffer from being a bit more entertaining. I think automatically, again, going back to that point around humor, right? People assume when you say entertaining brand, you mean a brand that isn't taken seriously. And I think that's the biggest change that we're trying to make in people's heads. Being entertaining doesn't mean that you're then somehow frivolous and shouldn't be taken seriously. In fact, I feel in the world that we're in today, entertainment can actually be a big builder of trust rather than be in replacement of trust. Goes back to that point we're making around this fact that, you know, authenticity is dead, and storytelling, I believe, is having a massive comeback. We're seeing that in the rise of brand mascots coming back to the fore as well. We're seeing that in the death of purpose equally in the world that we live in. So yeah, I would argue that the number one blocker in people's heads is this fact that they think that entertainment means I can't be a brand that is taken seriously.
Yeah.
But an entertaining brand is only an entertaining brand if it has a good product behind it equally. Yeah. It will always come back to that as one of the 4 Ps of marketing. But yeah, no, I think every brand can serve being a bit more entertaining. And I think the best, again, if the next question after that is like, okay, well, where do I start in a boardroom? I would say focus on, and we talk about this all the time with all of our clients, focus on the most boring or underserved or least looked at part of your business. It might be a marketing channel, for instance. So it might be something like TikTok, which is very experimental. It might be YouTube, where you don't really have a presence yet. It's usually a channel that, you have a very low following in that no one really cares about. It might be playing around with influencer, for instance, and putting a small budget towards that. But equally, it could be sort of a part of the funnel or a part of the business. So we're working on a project with Rescue Remedy, looking at their Amazon ads, kind of the part that when you land on a page for Rescue Remedy, it says how to use the product and how to take it, and they're very, very boring placements usually, and we're thinking about how we can bring in some of the magic of the campaign we've done into those placements. And yeah, those are the types of placements and parts of the business I would think about focusing the strategy on first, so that you can prove, look, in this area that no one really cared about in the business, that everyone thought was super boring, that was hard to kind of make any incremental gains in, we've had a bit of incremental gain. Now can I scale that into another channel, or now can I scale that into another part of the business?
Yeah. And I can getting into that, because this is really probably the important part, and hugely where Tracksuit can come in as well, Leanne, is this measurement piece, and how you've seen entertaining brands in terms of, you know, the measurement approach, and then how it's kind of leading into that improving purchase intent. Is like that's really important, right? We want people to be entertained, but we want it to drive the commercial outcome. So can you tell me a bit about that and what you've seen from the Tracksuit data?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has to work, right? It's not entertaining for entertainment's sake. But of course, entertainment does work. Absolutely, it does. Entertainment is cheap. There is a link to market share. And actually, you know, traditional metrics are so important. Awareness is linked with market share. So there are absolutely brilliant outcomes that need to be looked at and measured. And I think sometimes it's undervalued and underestimated. So it's not necessarily trying to measure something new. It's absolutely the core metrics that we know and have been built up over time. In terms of how we've built our model, we have worked closely with Mark Ritson to make sure what we're looking at, and it's not necessarily about anything new. Although having said that, through this work, we do have a better sense of what drives entertaining brands as well. It does come back to the things that we've talked about, like getting attention. You have to be able to get people to pay attention, and entertainment helps with that. I think, our brains are actually prediction machines. So we're always predicting what will happen. And so novelty allows us to get people's attention. It's like a dopamine hit to the brain. So we love that. Character. So being relatable like a TV character, it comes back to everything that we talked about. I think sometimes we're measuring emotional connection, but actually the way you get there is through character. And so I think sometimes we're measuring outcomes as opposed to the drivers, and understanding, are we actually delivering on those drivers? So, all of those things are important as well. And great social content is also a factor. I think that's really a symbol of being part of culture, being part of that conversation and being part of a community and building that world or that energy circuit. And we've seen actually entertainment, really triggers more emotional responses. And when you have higher emotional responses, you get a much better response. There's statistics like over a 300% lifetime value than a brand who has been neutral or hasn't performed as well in terms of emotional responses. Emotional responses and emotional connection, I think, drive sales by 23% is another statistic. So there is lots of evidence here that shows being entertaining is so powerful. And of course, also, and it's cheap. That actually, if you can be entertaining, you get that earned response, and it doesn't cost you as much. And again, this is what is so brilliant, is that you don't have to be a massive brand with a massive budget. This is the way actually for smaller brands to outperform legacy brands.
100%. Couldn't put it better myself.
And it is, and I mean, because of the data, and the great thing about the report is so many examples, it has data points, so it's, I think, because the next step, if people are listening to this, right, I'm in, I'm bought in, I get the whole entertainment. And I think it was great that you brought B2B into it, Dan, as well, because I think that's really important. And to be fair to LinkedIn, last year they actually did some entertaining advertising. I think like Teamwork are doing a really good job of trying to just be entertaining. And so, like, there's lots of great examples of brands trying to be entertaining, and not, like, I understand the motions of product-led growth, but I think that doesn't mean you can't have a moment of entertainment. And just because somebody is, like, sorry, I'll stop ranting in a sec, but like, because somebody's like, well, our audience is CFOs, so we have to be serious. It's like, but CFOs, do things, other outside of looking at, no, like, do you know what I mean? I've met a lot of CFOs that are really funny people, and they're not just like, Ebenezer Scrooge.
Totally.
And he ends up being entertained anyway. So, like, it's
totally. I mean, it's a good comparison, in the same way, I know a lot of teachers, I know a lot of nurses and doctors, and you again assume that they're the most serious roles of all. They're some of the most darkly funny people I've ever met. Like, that's really and truly, people are people. They're, you should sell to them as such,
exactly,
and not take that for granted.
Right. Some of the things, I'm bought in. Doesn't matter. We're a small brand. We're in B2B. We talk to CFOs, but what are the things I could do today to start setting this in place? Because this isn't something you just can switch on and by tomorrow you're entertaining. Like, so maybe for both of you, some things they might be able to do, and maybe alongside that are the things that they can kind of talk to a CEO who might be a bit more reluctant. Like, maybe there's again language. So, like, there's a lot in that. So take the bits that you think are most relevant. So yeah, Dan.
I think I would read the report, obviously, first things first. Check the show notes, wherever that is. That's our one shameless plug for the episode.
Loads of them.
Great. Yes, please go and read the report. I would cut out, copy and paste, however you're experiencing the report, the page that specifically gives the financial data, which you would take into your CFO and your CEO to say, look, these brands are growing faster than anything else. I would do an audit of your brand based on entertainment value. So look at the different themes that we talk about in the report, and then analyze how well your brand is doing across those different categories, and then look at brands inside your category and outside your category that are winning, that you can maybe use as good case studies to the business. So again, if you're in B2B, try and find a couple examples of B2B brands. Again, if you can't find them, please get in touch with me and I'll help you find them. I've got an endless list of case studies to show you. And then I think it's about putting together a couple of slides for your board that show what a first experiment could be. We always talk in experiments when we talk about entertainment first marketing, in order to actually make it more scientific, bring in the science to the magic. Think about, okay, what's the most boring part of my business that I can focus on first? This is where we're going to experiment first. And then think about how you're tracking and measuring that. As Leanne said, it might be funnel metrics, but equally it might be that you're looking at more kind of day-to-day metrics as well, in terms of on social, rather than looking at reach and impressions. You might be looking at engagement, shares, saves. Attentive cost per metric is a metric that I really like, which is did someone spend over 10 seconds with this piece of content that I've created?
I think Karen Nelson Field called CPMs as a cost per meaningless thousand.
Yeah.
She's brilliant. Leanne, how about you? What would you add?
I think it's coming back to thinking about your brand, looking at the drivers that we know drive, what are the things that make you an entertaining brand? How can we track that over time? We can build that in. Then coming back to that emotional honesty piece, that emotional connection, how do we then start to think about what that looks like? Within our dashboard, we can track conversion. So we understand, well, what are the things that are converting people from not just being aware, but considering and then making a purchase. So it's how do we bring those things together? So absolutely love to have a conversation about what that could look like and how it could work. Dan and I have had so many conversations with so many brands since launching this report. It's been phenomenal. It's meant that we don't have much of a weekend, but we're super excited to be having this conversation. So it's a great problem to have. So anyone who's keen, please, reach out to us.
Brilliant. Yeah. And also, I think just generally, I think Tracksuit are doing such wonderful work in just kind of, the data that you have, the richness of the data, and then providing that in, like, there's the brand map of Britain, the brand map of Australia is out now. And so, I think there's lots of like data points, insights that are coming out from Tracksuit all the time. And so if people aren't signed up to get that, I would definitely recommend it, because within that, then you'll be like, oh, that's a brand that entertains. And here I now see that they've gone from this, consideration to this. And, that helps kind of always build that case. And also back to kind of the CEO, the C-suite being human beings, Johnny Cal is now CMO in PepsiCo. He was saying that, there's no kind of generic CEO or CFO, they're not come out of a factory. And so even if you're trying to have that conversation, try find out what are their interests, where's their fandom, and connect it to that somehow, and kind of say, well, if I showed you something that was about this and related to what we do, then that it can change the dynamic of those conversations. So
and Connor, I'm hoping in the next 6 months I have exactly that case study to bring to you for this brand that we're working with at the moment. So I'll be back in touch around then.
Definitely. Well, listen, thank you so much. I will have links in the show notes so people can find both of you and the report. And it is, we have only genuinely, we've talked about so much, but we've touched the surface. It's a wonderful report. I've shared it widely, and I definitely encourage people to check it out, read it, and share it with others. Listen, Dan, Leanne, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No.
Thank you very much, Connor.
Well, that was a fascinating episode, and there is so much more that we actually didn't have time to get into with Leanne and Dan. There's so much depth in what they've put together with the Entertainer Die report, and you can go to Small World, which is at Meet Small World, or tracksuit.com, and you'll be able to download the report there and find out more. Again, it's leveraging Tracksuit data and insights from Small World. And look, we talked about Paul Feldwick, we've seen it, we've got the likes of James Herman, lots of people talking about the need for entertainment. We talked about fame. These are all good things for us to do as brands, and people, I think, sometimes are concerned that we shouldn't be in a space that entertains people. And I can't remember where I heard it, and it may have been on John Evans' Uncensored CMO, which is obviously an amazing podcast, and someone from Geico talking about it in the insurance space, where it's a category that's quite serious, but they were saying that actually our role is to make what we communicate to you enjoyable in those moments. And look, the world of search is changing. It is a massive disruption. We're all seeing that in all of our businesses, and so we can't rely on things that have gotten us past in a couple of years. So really building our brands, building those memory structures, being salient is so important, and entertainment is a great way to do it. And you think about what that means for your brand. It's not the same for everybody. Anyway, listen, enough from me. Download the report, Entertain or Die, and you will get lots more insight into it. Again, you'll find that on Meet Small World, and you can go to gotracksuit.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode and can rate or review it, please do. I'd really appreciate it. If you have enjoyed it, you can even share it with somebody who isn't listening and you think may enjoy the episode. That's it for me. We are fast approaching our Cannes sessions, so they'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll have daily episodes from Cannes, and then lots of content after Cannes with people we are meeting over there, and lots of great interviews coming your way. So for me, Conor Byrne, your host, and again, thanks to Tracksuit for their support of this episode. I'll catch you next time. Take care.
If you would like to reach an engaged community of marketing leaders, get in touch with That's What I Call Marketing to discuss sponsorship opportunities.